You take a loss. It stings. And before you've even processed what happened, you're already looking for the next trade to make that money back. You enter without your usual criteria being met. Maybe you increase your position size because you need to recover faster. The trade goes against you. Now you're down even more. The desperation intensifies. You take another trade, and another, each one further from your plan, each loss compounding the emotional damage. By the end of the session, what started as a manageable loss has become a devastating drawdown. You know this cycle. You've lived it, and you've promised yourself 100 times you'll never do it again. Yet here you are. Revenge trading is the silent account killer. It's not a strategy problem. It's not a knowledge gap. It's a psychological pattern that bypasses everything you know about proper trading and turns you into a gambler chasing losses. Today, we're going to break down exactly why revenge trading happens, what's occurring in your brain when you're trapped in this cycle, and most importantly, how to stop it permanently and transform those painful losses into genuine learning experiences that actually improve your trading. This isn't about willpower. This is about understanding the mechanism and building systems that make revenge trading impossible. Let's start by defining revenge trading precisely, because understanding what you're dealing with is the first step to defeating it. Revenge trading is any trade taken primarily to recover from a previous loss rather than because it meets your established criteria. The key word is primarily. The motivation isn't setup quality or edge execution. The motivation is emotional. You need to get back to even, to erase the loss, to prove you weren't wrong. According to research published in the Journal of Behavioral Finance, analyzing over 50,000 retail trading accounts, approximately 34% of all trades taken within 1 hour of a losing trade qualify as revenge trades based on deviation from the trader's typical pattern. What makes revenge trading so destructive is that it compounds errors. Your first trade might have been a legitimate loss, part of your edge's normal distribution. But the revenge trade is taken outside your system, which means it doesn't have the statistical backing of your tested approach. Research by Terence O'Dean at UC Berkeley found that trades taken immediately after losses had win rates approximately 15% lower than the trader's baseline win rate. You're not just trading more frequently. You're trading worse, with impaired judgment and degraded decision-making. The pattern typically follows a predictable sequence. First comes the loss, which triggers an immediate emotional response. According to neuroscience research on loss aversion, the brain's amygdala activates when we experience financial loss, creating a threat response similar to physical danger. This activation impairs the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for rational decision making and impulse control. You're literally less capable of logical thought in the minutes following a loss than you were before it. Second comes the rationalization phase. Your brain starts generating reasons why taking another trade right now makes sense. The market is showing opportunity. You can see what went wrong with the last trade, and this time will be different. You're already at your computer. You're warmed up. Why waste the setup? These rationalizations feel logical in the moment because your brain is very good at making emotional decisions seem rational. Research on cognitive dissonance shows that humans are remarkably skilled at generating justifications for behavior that conflicts with their stated beliefs. Third comes the execution, usually with modifications that make it even riskier. You might increase position size to recover losses faster. You might skip your usual confirmation signals because you don't want to miss the entry. You might ignore warning signs you'd normally respect because you need this trade to work. According to behavioral economics research, people in loss recovery mode consistently take risks they would never accept under normal conditions, a phenomenon called the break-even effect. Fourth comes the outcome, which is usually another loss because you're trading outside your system under emotional impairment. This creates what psychologists call a negative reinforcement loop. The behavior produces the exact outcome you're trying to avoid, which intensifies the emotional state, which drives more of the same behavior. Each revenge trade makes the next one more likely, not less likely, because you're digging the psychological hole deeper. Understanding this sequence is crucial because it allows you to recognize revenge trading as it's developing rather than only in hindsight. The moment you notice yourself rationalizing why you need to trade right after a loss, you're in the danger zone. That recognition is your circuit breaker if you've prepared for it. To truly stop revenge trading, you need to understand what's happening in your brain when losses trigger this response. According to research in neuroeconomics by Colin Kammerer and others, financial losses activate the brain's pain centers. An fMRI study showed that losing money activates the anterior insula, the same region that processes physical pain and disgust. Your brain isn't differentiating between a trading loss and a physical injury. Both are perceived as threats that need immediate response. When the threat response activates, your nervous system floods with cortisol and adrenaline. These stress hormones are designed to help you fight or flee from physical danger, but in trading they create problems. Elevated cortisol impairs hippocampal function, which affects memory formation and retrieval. This is why you might not even remember exactly why you took that revenge trade later. The stress hormones were interfering with normal memory encoding. Research by John Coates on trader cortisol levels found that sustained elevated cortisol from repeated losses creates a state he calls learned helplessness in reverse, where traders become increasingly aggressive rather than cautious. There's also the role of dopamine in this process. Your brain's reward system anticipates that taking another trade could reverse the loss, and that anticipation releases dopamine even before you execute. According to research by Wolfram Schultz on dopamine and reward prediction, the anticipation of reward can be more powerful than the reward itself. When you're considering a revenge trade, your brain is getting a dopamine hit from imagining the recovery. This creates a craving to take the trade that's neurochemically similar to addiction. The combination of threat response from the loss and reward anticipation from potential recovery creates what neuroscientists call an approach avoidance conflict. Part of your brain is screaming to avoid further losses, while another part is craving the imagined reward of recovery. This internal conflict is psychologically exhausting and typically resolves in favor of the approach behavior because the dopamine system is so powerful. Research shows that in approach avoidance conflicts involving potential monetary gain, the approach tendency wins approximately 70% of the time, even when the rational choice is avoidance. Understanding this neuroscience isn't just academic. It explains why willpower alone fails. You're trying to use conscious reasoning to override powerful unconscious neurochemical processes. That's like trying to think your way out of being hungry. The hunger is a biological drive that doesn't care about your logical arguments. Similarly, the revenge trading urge is a neurochemical drive that your prefrontal cortex can only partially influence, especially when that same prefrontal cortex is impaired by cortisol. The good news is that neurochemical responses can be interrupted and redirected. Your brain's threat and reward systems are fast, but not infinitely fast. They take seconds to minutes to fully activate. If you can create a pause between the loss and the potential revenge trade, you give your prefrontal cortex time to reassert control. Research on cognitive behavioral therapy for impulse control shows that even a 60-second delay between impulse and action reduces impulsive behavior by approximately 40%. The key is building that delay into your process. Here's something that might surprise you. Revenge trading serves a psychological function, which is why it's so persistent. On the surface, it's clearly destructive. It loses money, violates your plan, creates stress. But at a deeper level, it's serving a need, and until you understand what need that is, you'll keep repeating the pattern. According to research in depth psychology, self-destructive behaviors persist because they're adaptive at some level, usually in ways the person isn't consciously aware of. For many traders, revenge trading serves as a coping mechanism for the intolerable feeling of being wrong or losing control. When you take a loss, especially if you did everything right according to your plan, there's a sense of helplessness. The market didn't care about your analysis. It did what it wanted. That loss of control is deeply uncomfortable for most people. Revenge trading creates the illusion of regaining control. You're doing something. You're active. You're fighting back rather than passively accepting the loss. Research on locus of control by Julian Rotter shows that people vary in whether they believe outcomes are determined by their actions or by external factors. Traders with a strong internal locus of control struggle more with revenge trading because they can't accept that some outcomes are beyond their influence. Taking another trade immediately feels like reasserting control, even though it's actually giving up control to your emotions. The behavior serves the psychological need to feel agency, even while undermining actual agency. Revenge trading also functions as a distraction from emotional pain. Sitting with a loss is uncomfortable. You feel disappointment, frustration, maybe shame if you made a mistake. Those emotions are painful, and humans are wired to avoid pain. Taking another trade shifts your attention away from those feelings toward a new focus. This trade, and whether it will work. According to research on emotional avoidance, people consistently choose behaviors that distract from painful emotions, even when those behaviors create worse outcomes long-term. The immediate relief of distraction overrides the logical knowledge that you're making things worse. There's also a social and self-image component. Many traders have an identity built around being successful, smart, capable. A loss threatens that identity. It's evidence you're not as good as you think you are. Revenge trading becomes an attempt to restore the identity. If you can recover the loss quickly, it's like it never happened. Your self-image remains intact. Research on identity threat shows that people engage in increasingly risky behavior when their core identity is challenged, which explains why losses that threaten your identity as a good trader trigger more intense revenge trading than losses you can dismiss as bad luck. The practical implication is that you can't stop revenge trading just by deciding to stop. The behavior is serving psychological needs that have to be addressed differently. You need alternative ways to cope with loss of control, to process painful emotions, and to maintain healthy self-image that doesn't depend on never being wrong. Without those alternatives, the psychological pressure will keep pushing you toward revenge trading no matter how many times you've resolved to stop. Now let's get practical. How do you actually stop yourself in the moment when the revenge trading urge hits? You need circuit breakers, predetermined actions that activate automatically when you take a loss. These aren't suggestions you'll remember when emotional. They're mandatory protocols built into your trading routine. According to research on implementation intentions by Peter Gallwitzer, creating specific if-then plans increases goal achievement by 65 to 300% depending on the domain. The most effective circuit breaker is a mandatory break after any loss. Your rule should be simple and non-negotiable. After closing any losing trade, I will not take another trade for at least 30 minutes. During that 30 minutes, you physically step away from your computer. This rule removes the possibility of revenge trading by creating a time buffer that allows your neurochemistry to normalize. Research on cortisol recovery shows that stress hormone levels begin returning to baseline within 20 to 30 minutes if the stressor is removed. By forcing yourself away from the trading environment, you're giving your prefrontal cortex time to reassert control. But here's the critical part. You need to have a specific activity planned for that break. Don't just sit there thinking about the loss. That keeps the emotional activation high. According to research on attentional focus and emotional regulation, deliberately shifting attention to neutral or positive activities accelerates emotional recovery. Your break activity might be going for a short walk, doing 10 minutes of stretching, listening to music, watching something engaging but not trading related. The activity needs to fully occupy your attention so you're not ruminating. Another circuit breaker is a daily loss limit that's not just a number, but a complete shutdown protocol. Let's say your daily loss limit is 2% of your account. Your rule should be, if I hit this limit, I immediately close all positions, close my trading platform, and I'm done for the day with no exceptions. According to analysis of retail trading data, traders who implement and respect daily loss limits have 68% lower maximum drawdowns than traders without such limits. The limit prevents a bad day from becoming a catastrophic day. You also need an emotional state checklist that you review before every trade. This checklist asks simple yes or no questions. Am I calm right now? Is this trade based on my criteria or on recovering from a loss? Would I take this exact trade if I hadn't just had a loss? If you answer no to any question, you don't take the trade. Research on pre-commitment strategies shows that people who evaluate their emotional state before decisions make significantly better choices than those who decide based purely on external circumstances. Physical interventions can also serve as circuit breakers. Some traders use the physiological sigh technique researched by Andrew Huberman. 2 quick inhales through the nose followed by a long exhale through the mouth, repeated 3 times. This pattern rapidly reduces amygdala activation and anxiety. Others use cold water on their face, which activates the mammalian dive reflex and quickly lowers heart rate and stress response. The specific technique matters less than having a physiological interrupt that you deploy immediately when you feel the revenge urge. The key insight here is that circuit breakers work because they don't require willpower in the moment. They're predecisions. You decided weeks ago that you take 30-minute breaks after losses. So when the loss happens and your emotional brain is compromised, you're not trying to make a good decision under pressure. You're just following the protocol. According to research on decision fatigue, pre-made decisions that require no evaluation are followed at much higher rates than decisions that require in-the-moment judgment. Beyond immediate circuit breakers, you need a structured process for extracting value from losses. This is how you transform losses from purely negative experiences into learning opportunities. According to research on deliberate practice by Anders Ericsson, what separates experts from others isn't just practice volume, but the quality of reflection on errors. Traders who systematically analyze their losses improve faster than those who simply move on to the next trade. Your loss processing ritual should happen after your mandatory break, once you've emotionally settled. The ritual has specific components that you work through methodically. First, you categorize the loss. Was this a good loss or a bad loss? A good loss is one where you followed your plan perfectly, but the trade simply didn't work out. This is the cost of your edge and requires no behavioral change. A bad loss is one where you violated your plan. This requires understanding why the violation occurred. According to research on learning from failure, people who categorize failures based on controllable versus uncontrollable factors show better subsequent performance than those who don't make this distinction. If the loss was controllable, meaning you made a mistake, that's actionable information. If it was uncontrollable, meaning you executed perfectly and variance went against you, that's data confirming you're trading your system. Both are valuable but require different responses. Second, if the loss involved a rule violation, you investigate the why without judgment. What were you thinking right before you broke the rule? What were you feeling? What was happening in the market that triggered the decision? Research on metacognition shows that understanding the context of errors is more valuable than simply noting that errors occurred. You're looking for patterns. Do you break rules more when you're tired? After winning streaks? During high volatility? These patterns reveal where your psychology is vulnerable. Third, you write down the specific lesson in one sentence. Not vague reflections like, I need more discipline. Specific lessons like, I move my stops when I'm trading in the first hour after market open, so I should avoid that time frame. Research on learning retention shows that verbally articulating lessons in specific concrete language increases the likelihood of behavioral change compared to general reflections. Fourth, you identify one concrete adjustment to prevent similar losses. This might be adding a rule, modifying your checklist, changing your routine. The adjustment should be small and immediately implementable. According to research on habit formation, small specific changes are more sustainable than large sweeping reforms. If you discover you revenge trade after losses because you don't want to end the session on a loss, your adjustment might be, I will schedule specific trading hours and stick to them regardless of my last trade result. Fifth, you log the loss with its category and lesson in your trading journal. This creates a database of your psychological patterns over time. Research on data-driven self-improvement shows that people who track metrics about their behavior achieve goals at significantly higher rates than those who rely on memory and impression. After 3 months of logging, you'll have concrete data about your most common mistakes and the conditions that trigger them. The entire ritual should take 10 to 15 minutes. It's not punishment. It's extraction of value. Every loss is expensive data about your psychology and your edge. The ritual ensures you're getting the education you paid for. According to research on reflective practice, professionals who engage in structured reflection after errors show learning curves 2 to 3 times steeper than those who don't reflect systematically. One of the most powerful ways to prevent revenge trading is to fundamentally change how you perceive losses. Most traders view losses as failures, as evidence they're not good enough, as pain to be avoided. But according to information theory and statistical learning, losses are simply data points in a distribution. They're information about whether your edge played out on this specific instance or not. Reframing losses from emotional events to informational events dramatically reduces the revenge trading impulse. Research by Carol Dweck on growth mindset shows that people who view challenges and setbacks as opportunities to learn show dramatically better long-term outcomes than those who view them as evidence of fixed inability. In trading terms, a growth mindset means seeing a loss as information about market conditions, your execution, or normal variance, not as a verdict on your capability. This reframe isn't just mental gymnastics. It changes your neurological response to loss. When you view a loss as failure, your brain processes it as a threat, activating the stress response we discussed earlier. When you view a loss as data, your brain processes it more neutrally, activating analytical rather than emotional systems. According to neuroscience research on reappraisal, the same objective event produces different neural activation patterns depending on how it's cognitively framed. By consciously choosing to frame losses as information, you're literally changing which parts of your brain dominate the response. Here's a practical way to implement this reframe. After every trade, winning or losing, ask yourself only one question. Did I follow my rules? If yes, mark it as a process win in your journal regardless of financial outcome. If no, mark it as a process loss regardless of financial outcome. This separates execution quality from market outcome. A trade that loses money but followed your plan perfectly is a win. A trade that makes money but violated your plan is a loss. According to research on process versus outcome focus, people who evaluate themselves based on controllable process rather than uncontrollable outcomes show better performance under pressure and lower anxiety. When your definition of success is "I followed my plan" rather than "I made money," each individual trade outcome becomes less emotionally charged. You can take a financial loss without experiencing psychological loss because you succeeded at the thing you actually control: execution. This reframe also helps with the identity threat aspect of losses. If your identity is built around being a good trader, and good trader means never losing, then losses are devastating to your self-image. But if good trader means consistently executing a tested plan, then losses that occurred while executing properly actually reinforce your identity rather than threatening it. You're being the trader you want to be even when the market doesn't cooperate. Research on cognitive behavioral therapy for trading psychology has found that traders who successfully reframe losses as information rather than failures show 71% reduction in revenge trading behavior compared to baseline. The reframe works because it addresses the root cause, the emotional charge that makes the loss intolerable. When losses are just data points, there's nothing to revenge against. You don't take revenge against a coin for coming up tails. You just note the result and continue playing your edge. Everything we've discussed helps in the moment and over weeks, but building true immunity to revenge trading requires long-term psychological development. This isn't about tricks or techniques. It's about becoming a different kind of person who no longer needs revenge trading as a coping mechanism. According to research on personality change and adaptation, sustained behavioral patterns create lasting changes in psychological traits over months and years. The foundation is developing what psychologists call distress tolerance, the ability to experience uncomfortable emotions without needing to immediately change or escape them. Trading will always involve uncomfortable emotions. Losses will always sting. Uncertainty will always create anxiety. You can't eliminate these feelings, but you can increase your capacity to experience them without reactive behavior. Research on distress tolerance training shows that people who practice sitting with discomfort in structured ways show significant improvement in impulse control across multiple domains. One way to build distress tolerance specifically for trading is through exposure practices. This might sound strange, but deliberately taking small planned losses as part of your training can increase your tolerance for the experience. If you practice taking losses when you're emotionally neutral, when nothing is going wrong, you're training your nervous system that losses aren't catastrophic. According to research on exposure therapy, repeated exposure to a feared stimulus in safe conditions reduces the fear response over time. You also need to develop what researchers call emotional granularity, the ability to precisely identify what you're feeling. Most traders just know they feel bad after a loss. But there's a difference between feeling disappointed, frustrated, ashamed, anxious, or angry. Research shows that people with high emotional granularity regulate emotions more effectively than those who experience emotions as undifferentiated states. When you can identify, "I'm feeling frustrated and anxious," you can address those specific feelings. When you just feel bad, you're more likely to engage in avoidant behavior like revenge trading. Building a life outside trading is also crucial for long-term resilience. If trading is your entire identity and self-worth, every loss carries enormous psychological weight. If trading is one important part of a multifaceted life, losses are more contextually appropriate. You had a bad trading day, but you're still a good parent, friend, athlete, whatever other roles define you. According to research on identity diversification, people with multiple important identity domains show better psychological resilience to setbacks in any single domain. Physical practices matter too. Regular exercise, adequate sleep, and good nutrition aren't luxuries. They're prerequisites for emotional regulation. Research on the gut-brain axis shows that nutrition affects neurotransmitter production. Studies on sleep deprivation show that just one night of poor sleep significantly impairs prefrontal cortex function. If you're trying to resist revenge trading while sleep-deprived and living on caffeine and processed food, you're making it exponentially harder than it needs to be. Finally, consider working with a trading psychology coach or therapist if revenge trading persists despite your best efforts. According to research on therapeutic interventions for impulse control, professional guidance produces better outcomes than self-directed change for most people. There's no shame in getting help. Elite athletes work with sports psychologists. Elite traders work with trading psychologists. The investment in psychological development pays larger dividends than any technical trading education. The ultimate goal is reaching a state where losses genuinely don't trigger the revenge impulse anymore. Not because you've white-knuckled your way through the urge thousands of times, but because the urge itself has diminished. You've retrained your psychological and neurological responses so that a loss is processed as neutral information. You've developed tolerance for the discomfort, and you've built alternative coping mechanisms. When you reach that state, revenge trading isn't something you resist. It's something that simply doesn't occur to you. That's true freedom, and it's absolutely achievable through consistent application of what we've covered today. Your losses can either destroy you through revenge trading or develop you through deliberate learning. The choice is yours, and now you have the tools to choose wisely.